We've learned a lot about the devastating lifelong impacts that can come from the type of head injuries that are all too common on the football field. In response, the NFL put some safeguards in place, none of which, it seems, were followed when Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa hit his head hard on the field during a game against the Buffalo Bills last Sunday. He tried to get up and shake it off, then fell back down. And yet somehow he returned later in the game with the Dolphins' leadership saying he passed the concussion evaluation during halftime. And then he played again Thursday, just 4 days later, and took a massive hit midway through the game that resulted in his being carted off the field on a stretcher. He was later diagnosed with a concussion, and unfortunately, that was a moment my next guest, Concussion Legacy Foundation co-founder and CEO Chris Nowinski, saw coming. He tweeted before the game this: "If Tua takes the field tonight, it's a massive step back for concussion care in the NFL. If he has a second concussion that destroys his season or career, everyone involved will be sued and should lose their jobs, coaches included." And afterwards, Chris wrote, "I take no pleasure in being right. Pray for Tua." We saw this coming. Chris Nowinski joins me now. He's also a former All-Ivy football player, pro wrestler, neuroscientist, and as I said, co-founder of BU's CTE Center. Chris, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Jim.
So when you were watching the game on Sunday and you saw the hit and you saw Tua's reaction, what was your first reaction?
My reaction was, oh, good. Everyone saw how obvious this concussion was, so he's going to be out. Like, it's unfortunate, but the protocol's here for, and we've all finally learned, and we won't see him the rest of the game.
And when you heard that it was allegedly some back tweak or some such thing, how'd you react to that?
I was very angry, and probably for the first time, I implied a swear word on my Twitter response saying this is absurd. What are they doing? And yeah, I felt very confident that this was a concussion you can diagnose from your couch. And luckily, the rest of the world appears to agree with me now.
Okay, so 4 days later is the Thursday night game, which unfortunately a lot of us saw because of the incredibly painful scene. I just read a tweet that you said everybody involved should lose their jobs. Who is culpable here, Chris Nowinski?
So this one, I think there's four groups, right? First, there's the medical staff. And while they have fired the unaffiliated neurotrauma consultant, it's not that person's call. It's actually the team doctor's call. So I'm very worried about the experience and skills of this team doctor, and I would expect that person won't be there at the end of the season or renewed next season. The coach, the other message we're trying to get out there is we can recognize concussions now. Everyone in football knows they look like they've had them. So for the coaching staff not to step in and go, diagnosis doesn't seem right. This guy's the future of our franchise. We're going to have a great season. They should have stopped and pulled him out. And I've been happy to see a lot of coaches, Rex Ryan, people on TV saying, yeah, you treat him like your son, you don't put him back. And I don't know what the ownership or the leadership of the team was thinking. I'm sure they were watching the game. They all know that's a concussion. And the reason I predicted it before it happened is I wasn't going to really say anything, but then the NFL was promoting the Thursday night game on their social media, saying, "Oh, it's Tua versus Joe, our two young hot quarterbacks." And I'm like, all right, now they're a couple books. I thought the NFL was at least smart enough to call the Dolphins and say, "Hey, this would be a really bad look. That was clearly a concussion," but they didn't. They promoted it, and so it just sort of the veil is again lifted that this is not about the players and their health. The NFL is just out there trying to, maximize their profit and reach Roger Goodell's goals, and people are going to get hurt in the process unless we step up and fight back.
Speaking of the coach, well, you heard it too. Something he said after Thursday's game, he could not be this stupid. This is Mike. I'm serious. I mean, this is Mike McDaniel. Here's part of what he had to say after the second concussion, the Thursday night game. Here's McDaniel.
The best news that we could get is that everything is checked out, that he didn't have anything more serious than a concussion.
The best news is he didn't have anything more serious than a concussion?
I've softened a tad on my stance on that because I was very aggressive on that too. This guy doesn't get
Why?
it. Because
why'd you soften?
If you saw the mechanism of his fall, if you saw him backboarded, you would think you're backboarded because you were worried he had a neck injury. So seeing him fall straight back, like there's almost zero chance he had a neck injury. But now I'm thinking about it, he was probably referring to the decorticate posturing. So the fact that he looked like a stroke victim when he clenched his hands together because his cortex was that temporarily damaged that it was like having a stroke. I'm guessing he was confused by that, not being a brain injury, but that's just a sign of a brain injury. So the worst possible outcome was always going to be a brain injury, and that's what he had. But maybe his lack of medical experience influenced that decision. That's the kindest I've been to him all week, because everything he's saying makes no sense, and it's like he's never heard of concussions before.
Not just, you're kinder than I should say, but you know more than I do too. Not only what he said after the game, he's bragging, he's describing how they rode back on the plane together, him and Tua, and he's sitting next to Tua. They're talking, they're laughing, and then all of a sudden Tua starts watching a movie on his phone. Even I know, thanks to you, by the way, and your colleagues, that no screen time is part of the protocol once you've had a concussion, and apparently he didn't know that or didn't give a damn about it.
Yeah, I don't know if you knew that. People's expectations for concussions are not always appropriate. So they always assume like if you had a concussion, you're going to be groggy and you're going to be sad and you're going to, look like someone who's hurt. But those of us who've had them know that there are often times where people are knocked unconscious for like a minute or two. They'll pop up and they swear they're fine, but they don't even know a concussion ever happened. And that might be the situation we have here, that Tua's either not fully aware of how bad he looked, because he was, when you have a midbrain injury, your memory may be impaired, so he didn't know what happened, or else he's trying to put on a good front because he's scared to death now of being labeled a concussion guy, which means he may not be re-signed or get the best, maximize his contract, because the team's going to blame him for getting concussions when actually it was the team and the league who put him in this bad spot.
Chris, you've worked off and on with the NFL as a result of the brilliant research and work you and your colleagues have done. I, as a consumer, and I'm almost embarrassed that I am of the game, say they are not to be trusted at all. All they care about is getting the best players back on the field as fast as they possibly can and let their health be damned. Is that unfair?
That's a great question. In this situation, it's a reminder that the incentives are not aligned, and the NFL prefers to have their stars in the field rather than having proper concussion care. And that we've known that forever. We thought it was getting better. This is a reminder that it's not. And I always like to say, though, like, I was already extremely angry with the NFL to start this season, not because necessarily of concussion care. I thought we're better at that, but because of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. So we're now live in a world where the NFL knows and has admitted their game causes this disease. And I would think, they just moved the Pro Bowl to flag, and we know that we need to convert youth tackle football to flag. Kids should not be playing tackle football before high school under any circumstances. But then I saw them roll out a commercial with Peyton and Eli Manning where they're recruiting little kids to tackle football again. And it's like, when are they going to wake up and realize they do not want to be playing the role of the Grim Reaper out there, recruiting our young children to football because it looks cool on TV, and then giving them a brain disease that they're going to, just leave them in the dust when they get broken down. My entire day has actually been absorbed by all the families who are connecting the dots and found us and are asking for help with their husbands who have CT. The last one, I've literally emailed, I said before this, 52-year-old ex-Canadian Football League player whose wife is desperate because he's a mess. And that's what happens if you play too much football, and we have to be honest about it.
We only have a few seconds left. You showed me a beautiful photograph of your son and daughter, little son and daughter, beforehand. Most parents watching the show, their kid's not going to be a pro football player. Would you let your kid, and is as lovely as I said, would you let your son play football? Should the parents watching the show let their kid play football quickly?
Yeah, they're not. I mean, they're not playing any contact sports till they're 14. We started a program called Stop Hitting Kids in the Head. No one's touching my kid's head till they're in high school, and then we'll talk again. From your lips to those parents' ears, Chris Nowinski, thanks to you and your colleagues for your fabulous work. Good to see you. Thanks, Jim.